the moment, I think we have a chance now to go to Robin Day, who is entertaining.
Well, with me are three well-informed political observers. Patrick Jenkins, columnist of The Guardian, Anthony Howard, editor of The New Statesman, Patrick Cosgrave, political editor of The Spectator. Gentlemen, you've heard what's been going on. No results, but three straw polls in marginal seats which suggest a swing to Labour. How do you read the situation?
Well, I'm Peter Jenkins, Robin. Patrick Jenkins is the one who cleaned his teeth in the dark.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, that's not a very good start on my part, but thank you for correcting me.
Now, what's interesting, I think, about these straw polls, and they've tended to be rather accurate in the past, but on the figures, the earlier figures, the detailed ones which David Butler gave us, are of a reverse of what the opinion polls have been suggesting in one sense, and that is that Labour is doing rather better in the South than in the North. Now, I suspect that from the latest swing figure he gave us, the Labour figure must have come up in Halifax. But I mean, I think that this does really put a completely new complexion on the election if Labour is doing well in the South. Also, these figures do suggest that the Liberal support is evenly spread around the country. And if so, I know that the Liberals tonight have had a computer, they have their computer which has been at work on this, and on this sort of swing they are predicting themselves 44 seats. And in which case, it points to a minority government, doesn't it?
Thank you, Peter. Very hard.
Well, I have the impression that we're in for a very exciting night. We may be in a night, the one you remember, Robin, like 1964, when we sweated it out to, what was it, about 2:45 on Friday afternoon. I don't rule that out at all. What I must say gives me some kind of pleasure is that it seems to me, as of now, if these polls are right, the real casualties of the election are going to be those people who told us how we were going to vote. I'm talking about the opinion poll merchants. And I would find it very healthy for democracy that they really got a black eye. This time there can be no excuses. The trend was all going. They went on polling to the end. If they are wrong, and I don't know, because these are straw polls, if they are wrong, I for one will rejoice.
Do you smell a Labour victory?
I think I get a scent of a Labour victory. And enough, I got that earlier today when I listened to what the poll had been throughout the country. And if it is going to be an 80% poll, then you and I know that we've always believed in it, maybe folklore, this does help the Labour Party when the middling and inferior sort of people come out to vote.
Patrick Cosgrave, what are your feelings of what little we know now?
Like Peter and Tony, I'm certain that those straw polls are far superior as predictors of what's going to happen than the national opinion polls which appear in the daily papers. I've thought throughout this campaign that Labour were almost certain to win it. And on these figures, the Liberals are not doing quite well enough to make a major breakthrough. I think we'll have a Labour government tomorrow.
Do you think the Liberals are going to hold the balance of power? Do you think that's a
Well, they might. I mean, obviously, if you try to even out both the polls in the newspapers and the straw polls we've seen this evening, the odds would be on a minority government.
Now, from your knowledge of politics, supposing we get this kind of situation, do you think that either Mr. Heath or Mr. Wilson, whoever has the marginal addition of votes to make them in the lead, do you think they're more likely to govern as best they can or try to form a minority coalition on the Canadian style?
They won't govern at all. I mean, I'm quite sure what will happen. That the Prime Minister will say, I am in charge of the Queen's government. Until I am defeated, I shall remain Prime Minister. And we'll go back to the 1923-24 situation, and he will challenge the Liberals to defeat him. If they do hold a balance of power, he will say, come then, are you going to precipitate a second general election? Think about the pound, gentlemen.
Yes,
I don't see him resigning and going to the palace at all.
I think it's very important to remember that even if Labour finish as the biggest party in the House of Commons, Mr. Heath remains as Prime Minister. Yeah. And there's no obligation whatever on him to resign until he's beaten in the House of Commons.
In any case, I think we're jumping two hurdles before that time here, because it's obviously going to be very much influenced by how narrow that majority is, how small a minority government it is. I mean, if one or other of the major parties finds themselves with a majority of two over the other major party, then the situation is clearly quite different than if the Liberals hold the balance by one vote or something of that kind. So I think we should leave that until later in the evening.
Yes. If this sort of situation does arise, do you see any real chance of a coalition?
No, not a formal coalition. Everybody has said no, and I think that they mean it. and I think also the Liberals mean it. I think the Liberals are going to keep their own counsel for several days if there's a close result.
I see a
I think
de
the
facto.
Liberals are more likely to support the Conservatives than to support.
I see a de facto coalition, Robin, in this sense. Mr. Thorpe has to do nothing if Mr. Heath says, I'm staying in power. He doesn't have to do any positive act. If, on the other hand, he wants Mr. Wilson to go in, he actually has to throw his troops on that side. That's the difference.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Alistair?
Well, there we have the discussion about what might happen if it's a very narrow decision tonight and tomorrow, as it could very well be, given the polls that we have so far. Let's go and see what the count is like at Wolverhampton, which is also very much in this horse race to be first past the post, and Philip Tibbingham.
2 for the price of 1 here at the Civic Hall in Wolverhampton. On the left of your picture, Greenwich constituency, which must now be considered marginal with changes in boundaries, but even more fascinating on the right-hand side, Enoch Powell's former constituency, and nobody's taking any bets at all on what might happen there as a result of his remarkable behaviour. A very heavy poll here. It's said even between 85 and 90%. They're talking about a result in about half an hour, but frankly, I believe that when I see it. Philip Tibbingham at Wolverhampton.
Well, while we're waiting now, David, I think a declaration is imminent really now. So far, then, the polls have changed. They've said 2 things. They said something this morning, they said something this evening.
Well, it's a different sort of poll this evening. These are interviews with about 3,000 people as they came out of the polls in 3 constituencies, one in the south, one in the west, and one in the north, and they show 2.2% swing to Labour, the sort of thing that would just put Labour back in power if there wasn't an increased Liberal vote. But they also show a Liberal vote of between 23 and 24%, and that would point to something in the region of 20 to 30 Liberal seats. There the arithmetic gets very dicey.
Because they're just at the point of takeoff, where they might really do very great things if they did above that in some parts of the country.
Yes, and we're fairly sure that their success will be fairly unevenly spread. And so we, I think, are going to be hesitating for much longer tonight than we've ever hesitated before to say what the final outcome is in the election.
So we'd better advise everybody to